Well, good evening to anybody who may be listening this evening. I thought I'd have a quick chat before my bedtime, which is already past actually. But things seem to be moving so quickly in Britain at the moment because of the just a general breakdown of civil society, it would seem. The monarchy is beleaguered. The king is in a difficult position, and the truth seems to be coming out somewhat. And also the Prime Minister is involved in all this business through his appointed Foreign Secretary, and then also because of his predilection for young male prostitutes, which, I try to speak, carefully about these things, and I have spoken quite a bit about what is commonly called homosexuality, but it's not a real expression. It's just sodomy. That's its proper name. There, but for the grace of God and love thy neighbour as thyself, and so on and so forth. I bear these things in mind, but I don't think, I really don't believe that Israel or our people can be governed by a sodomite. I think this is quite improper. I don't think really we can be governed by any delegate. If we had a righteous king, I think there's some biblical support for that. If this were to occur before the return of Jesus Christ. But it would require a complete overhaul, of course, and the current king is unfit for the position he holds because he has not sought the counsel of the Lord. He's completely adopted the Islamic traditions, and this is treason against our land and against our people. So all this is supposedly going on. Of course, it's being orchestrated also because well, it generates news, and they have the pundits on YouTube speaking about all these things, and it's all very interesting, and this has happened and such has happened, and he said and she said. It's the way that the news media likes to operate, and of course the news media can be fairly easily manipulated, and in fact always is. So Lord knows what's going on, based also, of course, on just some written documents, as far as I can gather. And you can really write anything and then rewrite it. I mean, in this day and age with artificial intelligence, and they even speak about the Mandela effect and all these things. I mean, the written word has lost its poignancy, which is why, our Bible becomes ever more precious, because that can't be changed. The Lord will not allow that to be changed. The only thing that we can really rely on in terms of written testimony at the moment, we have to be very careful of anything that's not the King James Bible. That's where we get our instructions from. And at the same time as discovering that Israel is probably in North America. So the whole Holy Lands business was nothing more than another Masonic deception. Perhaps not Masonic, but satanic deception, elaborately staged to convince believers that we are just a minority sort of religion that's centered around the Middle East, and we don't really identify much with the Middle East, and it's a barren and a cramped region. But it does seem that this is all false, and that the biblical events played out in North America, which is a very different landscape. Far more grandiose and majestic, of course. Tremendous mountains, tremendous forests and rivers running the length and breadth of the land. I've only ever seen it in photographs or on the films. I've never been there, but the way that things are going, I'm thinking I really do need to get my passport sorted out and go there. And maybe we all need to go there at this rate. Maybe that's where the camp of the saints will be. So I do have my friend who lives in Arizona. I could go and see him maybe. But it's just inspiring to think of this stuff. I don't know how this would apply then. Well, we're all overseas, aren't we? Whether we're in South Africa or in Australia or in New Zealand, our main island territories, isolated territories. I don't know whether in the olden days there was more land, perhaps. I mean, there was initially, wasn't there? And then, what's it called, Pangaea, when there was just one landmass. I'm pretty sure you could walk from Russia to North America, or rather, well, Alaska, I guess, or Canada. I don't think you can now, but I believe that it's recorded that it used to be a viable passage on foot. And that was used to explain also why some of the Indian tribes had slightly oriental features. But you see now, with this understanding, we see that the Indian tribes actually are the people described in the Bible, the pagan nations with their sacrificial practices, their child sacrifice, you see, which I've been talking about recently and ended up getting into trouble over because my New Age friend was very offended that I should remind him, that those practices, are recorded among the Indian tribes. And also interesting is that they're called the Red Indians, isn't it? Because the Edomites are the red people, and they were wicked in the sight of God, and they lived in the heights. So I don't know. I mean, there's many different types of Indian tribes, and I think not all of them engaged in child sacrifice, as far as I can ascertain. And it made me wonder also about the Aboriginal people in Australia. How do they fit in then in this overall scheme of things? Were they our enemies? Did we travel to Australia as we are told in, when would it have been, in the 1700s perhaps, or perhaps even later. When I was a lad, you could get a ticket to Australia for £5, I think, as long as you promised not to go back to Britain within 2 years. I think that continued into the 50s, and then it was gradually removed. But maybe, again, maybe that's just another story. You do have to wonder, because, then we've got all the history in Britain. The fact that the throne is in Britain, though, does seem to stand. And the Mayflower, it wasn't the Christianizing of America, really. It was the retaking of our ancestral lands at that rate. I don't know, there's so many questions to be answered. But it does seem convincing, also because of the evidence given for the Mount of Olives, which was cleft in two when Jesus returned, and that's written in the Bible. And so if we're little seasoned believers, then we do believe that Jesus has returned. And so the valley would be cleft, and there is the exact topographical feature in the land claimed to be the Mount of Olives, with a long mountain chain that's cleft from east to west by a long valley. And the fellow who made the video claims that this is a unique feature in all mountain chains. It's the only one he was able to find. But there's historical documents supporting this idea also, but again, they've been concealed. It would have been, far more widely known that that's where the tribes were visited, but that's where God visited Moses in the mountain. In North America, not, in the whole, what we have been told is the Holy Land. It hardly bears thinking about, but they're pretty interesting times, I suppose. But they're very dark at the moment in Britain, and the weather has been just relentlessly dismal and grey and wet, and there's no reprieve on the horizon. Well, certainly for another, I think I saw 3 sunny days over the next 10, so it's not a great proportion, but there may be a glint of sunshine sooner or later, and ultimately there will be. As I've said before, it's always darkest before dawn. But I get a bit miserable sometimes about just feel anxious and uncertain because nothing makes sense somehow. God bless this evening.